We are all lazy in one or another way. And let me ask you this. Do you know that there are people with lazy eyes? Oh yes, in reality, there are many people who have this ailment. And it doesn't mean that they're tired of seeing you. No, not at all. It's simply because they have an eye misalignment condition called strabismus. And I am one of the many who has this condition. And by hardly looking at you today, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you the story about my current reality. You know, from the Young Frankenstein, Harry Potter, to the Man in Black, and even Lion King, pop culture has always had a tendency to associate people looking like me with utter ugliness and eccentricity. If you have ever paid attention, those characters have mainly been portrayed as crazy, out of their mind, or just bizarre. So I do believe that has molded society's perception about us, people with not so focused eyes, or in other words, people who have strabismus. So strabismus is basically a medical term referred for an eye misalignment condition where both of your eyes cannot look at the same time at the same place. You cannot look directly at the same place at the same time without one turning inward, upward, downward, or outward. As you can see, we lazy-eyed people come in so many different forms, shapes, and sizes. People who have been diagnosed with strabismus tend to have eye pain, blurry vision, headaches, and in some particular cases, people tend to develop double vision, where you see images in a double, as well as it affects your movement and balance, which is not the case for me, and I do not need surgery to go through my life. In my case specifically, I cannot look at the same place at the object for more than a few seconds before my weak eye wanders off, leaving my dominant eye/normal eye fixated on the object alone and sending signal to my brain. You could have probably heard strabismus being more commonly referred as wandering eye, crossed eye, squint, lazy eye, or how I once heard someone hilariously put it like recreationally oriented eyes. Not lazy at all, as we have no control over them or whatsoever. So growing up as a lazy eye has been both a blessing and a curse. It was this unique thing about me that helped me to shape my identity and who I am. At the same time, my lazy eye has been the reason for my all cheapest jokes for now nearly 22 years. I've milked my misaligned eye for humor. Every time I meet someone new, I feel the urge to crack wise about my lazy eye in order to let them know that it is okay and not makes them uncomfortable being around me, tiptoeing around this issue, or being sensitive about my eyes. But in some cases, some people do not even wait for my joke and feel the urge of bringing it out in the most embarrassing way possible. I clearly remember hurtful comments that followed me around like, "Are you actually talking to me?" Or, "Who are you looking at? I'm standing right in front of you." Laughing, as they say it, because my eyes weren't entirely focused on the person I was talking to. Those comments always left me angry, frustrated, and in tears. I do understand that some of the people probably had never intention of being hurtful, but back then, I had no choice, no comeback, other than silently taking it. Inevitably, I started to avoid making eye contact as much as possible. In such circumstances where eye contact became absolutely necessary, I forced my eyes to look on the person by constantly and excessively winking and blinking, just to be able to get my eye focus back, in a hope to get more synchronized eyeball movement, just for a little bit longer before it gazes away again and again. So all these unsolicited commands had built up a very strong foundation for the very distant and introverted Muborak that you see today. By that point, I started pressurizing myself to do more eye exercises, wear eye patches, do whatever I found online in hopes that I could fix it on my own and it would go away without a cosmetic surgery. How naive. Hoping that people wouldn't even notice my misaligned eye. Most folks didn't notice, but it didn't make me less uncomfortable being around them. Constantly thinking about where my eyes are focused at and struggles with having any kind of self-esteem, that affected my whole life. Honestly, all these remarks indeed overwhelmed me and made me question my appearance and ultimately my identity. It is these small things that made me want to spend less time around people. I didn't feel like justifying myself. I was better off alone. At least, I pretended to be. However, now, as I'm graduating very soon and trying to build my own career, where I have to practice socializing and networking, I became more self-conscious about my appearance. Before you say anything, I know that people should not be judged by the way they look. But believe me, they are. As a matter of fact, let's see how many of you sitting here today have encountered the similar situation where you have been judged or you were the one who actually judged someone by their looks, be it consciously or unconsciously, doesn't matter. Just think about it. See, we are all guilty of that. Even the nicest and kindest of all of us sometimes fall on the trap of physical attraction, not to mention some other factors. So, for all these long years while contemplating who I was, I always felt like I was never good enough. I was always looking for things to fix something about myself. I was never comfortable being just myself, So at that times, I always had an idea that, I would get happy one day. I developed so-called addiction of self-consciousness that constantly reportedly told me that you are gonna get happy when you get a surgery, or as soon as I get a surgery, I would get attention, recognition, and ultimately self-love. At that point, I've developed destination addiction, where I always thought that happiness was somewhere in the future. I almost forgot. I was so caught up in my world of fantasies and fake scenarios, imagining how I would get a surgery and everything would be perfect after that I almost forgot to live in the moment and enjoying every minute of it. At the same time, how exciting the idea of getting surgery back then was for me, it always left me with a room full of questions. Will I ever be viewed as who I was? Whether my family and friends will see me as the same lazy-eyed Muborak, or whether I will be perceived as weak and shallow for getting an eye surgery. These questions were indeed hard to answer. But even though a scenario of getting a surgery had a very small chance of success, and it had to be performed multiple consecutive times just to get my eye nerves fixed, and there was no guarantee that the condition wouldn't come back in a couple of years, I was still down for it. I was down for putting myself through it just because I wanted to feel the confidence of looking people in the eye. As the day that I was looking forward all my life was approaching, I suddenly felt that I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for it. I didn't want to put myself under the knife just because I wanted validation from other people so badly. It shouldn't require surgery to feel just me, It all didn't feel right. So I decided not to get it. As I reflect back now, I'm sure that if I went along with that surgery, it would have felt like I've lost a part of me, Once this unique feature about me was gone, my self-image would have suffered enormously. And probably I would have lost easygoing and goofy side of me after all. So I'm grateful that I realized that sooner than later. The turning point in my life was when I came across an article about how self-pity, isolation, and constantly finding fault in myself was actually destroying me and my life. And the only way to stand and the only way to find that secret component of happiness that I was looking for my whole life was standing in a path of self-acceptance and self-compassion. I reflected on this statement and started making some active changes towards it, and came to the recognition that I was living my life under the shield of self-doubt, constantly running from the feeling of embarrassment, disappointment, self-doubt, and frustration, no matter how hard it was for me to dig deep down into my insecurities. I realized that I was living my life trapped in a victim mentality, where I just assumed that, all the bad things happened to me and only me. And the worst part of all, it was all in my head, and at the time, I was absolutely unaware of it. I was just living my life under the shadows of self-doubt and insecurities. And here I am today, that shy, self-conscious girl, standing on this stage and sharing my journey with you. As I walked down this path of self-acceptance, I learned one important lesson: that every time I entered the zone of self-pity, I would stop, take a deep breath, and think of ways turning it into compassion, by continuously repeating to myself that it is okay to feel sad or bummed out for a while, but it doesn't mean that I should ignore the problem, isolate myself, turn into an antisocial individual, passing up on life opportunities. No. I finally saw how being vulnerable and compassionate about your insecurities was actually an attractive quality after all. But how? Why? I see you wonder. And let me tell you. Because these insecurities, that's what makes me real. I'm not some pretense, fictional character, right? I am uniquely me, with my own special mix of flaws, insecurities, and foolishness to contend with. We just have to understand that every one of us has challenges. Yes, today, mine can be having strabismus. And you can be conscious about your body shape, facial structure, your height, or your stretch marks. So what? There are unique features in all of us. We just need to realize that these small problems over which we have no control do not define who we are. They do not define how we feel about ourselves. So I started to celebrate my strengths. I made and still making a conscious effort to forgive myself. I made a commitment to stop comparing myself to others. I started looking people into the eye again and making eye contact, even if someone will notice and decides to comment on my not really focused eyes. So what? So what? I'm gonna put on the biggest smile and will be amazing the way I am, without overthinking it. The most vital part is realizing who you truly are and taking the first steps towards self-acceptance. Self-acceptance and compassion can be so empowering that it energizes you to push your boundaries and makes you feel comfortable in your own skin. So I ask you this, please fully focus on accepting yourself and loving yourself without worrying about judgments, rejections, and what would you look like in the eyes of other people. It's not important. The most important part is discovering who you truly are. And that's why it requires a leap of faith into discovering your true identity, where the author of perceptions about yourself is you. And it should only be you. Because deep down, we all know that our inner world is built from the perceptions and feelings we have about ourselves, our own identities. At the end of the day, we are what we perceive, right? If you are in a similar situation like me, If you are under avalanche of insecurities and judgments of society and struggling to execute on something big in your life, I ask you this. Remember that we never realize who we truly are unless we discard who we pretend to be. So I call on you today not to be afraid of accepting and loving yourself just the way you are, because each and every of us is beautiful and worthy to know the way we are. And it would be a shame not to find out your true, real, authentic selves throughout your lives. Thank you very much.